Welcome.
Hey, to you as well.
I put on my spooky voice because we are opening with some star charts today.
Oh, hell yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So you're going to divine some fates or personalities, or how does it work?
So more like interpreting personalities of some historical figures we covered
All right.
based on their horoscopes. So I have titled this segment, The Stars of Communist History.
Hell yeah.
Stars is in all caps.
Awesome.
And yeah, I figure we can make this a recurring bit, but I wanted to get through kind of the big three today.
All right. Big three of communism, as we know, that's Joseph R. Biden. Who else?
Kamala Harris, obviously.
Yeah. Kamala Harris and AOC, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Why not? According to Fox News.
Yeah.
No, we're going to start with Marx, Papa Marx, Lenin, and Mao.
All right. So for our MLM, our multi-level marketing listeners, but actually our Marxist, Leninist, Maoist listeners, we're covering all three of your bases here.
Is that what you use that for?
In communist circles, yes.
Okay, I know it as like men loving men, like gay shit.
Wow. And then there's also a multi-level marketing thing. So it's
you
versatile.
could be all three.
Yeah.
You could be in a multi-level marketing scheme and be, well, you couldn't really do that and be a communist, but you could be secretly a communist and also gay.
Wow. I would love to see the Venn diagram of people who are in that. That's
in all three.
That's a niche place to be.
For sure.
All right. Give us these readings.
So before we get into them, let's review some terms for the class. First off, I'm not an expert, by the way. I feel like I should go ahead and say that. I did a lot of Googling for this segment. And also, I think astrology is like 90% bullshit, but it's 100% very fun.
All right.
Okay, but the terms we want to review, sun sign. So that's like your core self. It's what most people know, you know.
Yeah.
I'm a Gemini. You're welcome. But it's all about like your ego and your will. It's like big picture stuff.
Yeah. All right.
We'll also be covering the moon sign and rising sign. Moon sign is all about inner emotions, and it's for people who are like in your inner circle. Oftentimes this addresses the question, what do you need to feel safe?
Ooh, so it's like your comfort maybe, or your... All right.
And finally, we have the rising sign, which is a lot about like your outward appearance and kind of like what people see of you, like at a first glance.
Okay. So your cover that they judge you by.
Yeah, your mask to the world.
All right.
All right, so first up, we got Karl Marx.
Great. Karl Marx, as everyone knows, invented communism.
He did it.
No, so we've covered a lot about him, so longtime listeners will know, but kind of the progenitor of Marxism, of the historical materialist outlook, looking at history as a series of processes, the main thing being how do people produce things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff in here. So his sun sign is a Taurus, which in general means he likes nice things. Like he's kind of materialist.
There we go.
He might be introverted, but overall kind of a chill guy, which I'm like, I don't know about that. He like was kind of a petty bitch sometimes, right?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he could be, yeah, he pretty much always thought he was right and he would argue with anybody, but he could he could hang out and drink wine with him and stuff. So
could be.
Yeah.
Maybe his Mars sign was more aggressive because that like determines how you do conflict.
Okay. All right.
So, and then his moon sign is also in Taurus. We got a double Taurus here. So this means he loves stability. And actually I took this quote from the site I used, which was astro-seek.com. You can just enter celebrities' birth charts. It was pretty great.
Oh, hell yeah.
But the quote from that I loved was, "You may have a practical nature dependent on material aspects."
They went in heavy with materialism here for the right guy. I mean,
yeah. Very practical. I think that totally tracks.
Yes.
Yeah.
No shred of utopianism in him. He, when you ask him a question of like, well, what's this going to be like? He's like, dude, I don't know. Nobody knows. Practical.
All right. Rising sign. Love this. Aquarius, they're just fucking weirdos is really the long and short of them. But in this case, it being a rising sign just means like he's able to see the big picture. He's kind of analytical, progressive, hopeful for mankind. Says he doesn't like being the center of attention, but actually loves it.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That one's pretty good.
He's definitely remembered as this major philosopher. Developed a theory which really radically shaped our world. I mean, think about it. Like the entire one phase of history called the Cold War is like centered on that. And he's an anti kind of great man of history, but definitely was always involved in all the historical issues of his day at the time. He was like throwing himself in there, writing about, putting forth his opinions on everything.
Yeah, maybe this is where some of his messy bitchiness comes in. It's like, he's like, no, you got to listen to me.
Right, yeah. Hear me out. I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we got Lenin.
All right. Lenny.
He's back. Another Taurus. I will say I went ahead and researched a bunch of people for this segment so we could choose who we wanted to go with first. And Taurus is a very popular sign, for communists.
All right.
The top 3 signs for communists, by the way. We'll go ahead and say those. Aquarius, there were a total of 6, not necessarily sun signs, but in there, basically. So 6 Aquarius, 5 Sagittarius, and 5 Taurus. So those are the top 3 signs.
That's those are the red signs. All right.
So yeah, his sun sign is Taurus, same as Mark's, likes beauty and pleasant things, can be a little introverted, kind of a chill dude. Maybe, this is his core aspect, so maybe this is more like who he really is.
Okay, because
he's kind of a fiery bitch.
Well, you mentioned also with Taurus that you like to be comfortable or you like material things. And Lenin, one of his, touchstone texts was that one about how to be a revolutionary, eat raw meat and get buff, remember? And he was very kind of personally ascetic. He didn't.
Ooh.
He wasn't that extreme, but he was not. He lived in kind of crappy apartments and did not really focus on material things at all. So.
Interesting. So maybe this one's not him. Okay. This one
part
does
anyway.
not track. All right. His moon sign is Aquarius, same as me.
Nice.
But what that means, I don't see how this applies to me, but I think it works out for Lenin. So he wants to distance himself from his emotions and be an impartial observer, and is kind of analytical. He feels like he really needs freedom in romantic relationships, and is just kind of moody too.
Okay. I could see him being secretly kind of moody. Definitely the separating the analytical part.
I feel like that tracks with the ascetic thing.
Yeah, and especially once you get into the thick of not just the revolution, but the Russian Civil War, then you're like, okay, I'm going to be an asshole here, but we're going to kill some people.
We got to do it.
And he was just, and remember, I think in our episode, we said something like how he was giving an interview to some member of the Western press, and he's just like, hey, don't gloss over the horrors of, the atrocities that we've done. We did it. We would do it again. Who cares?
Yeah, I think that works.
So, yeah.
All right. Rising sign, Scorpio, one of the most hated of signs besides Geminis. I love them. But a rising Scorpio might mean that you feel the need to fight against an evil power. Sometimes that's from within, but it can be external. And this was a quote I also stole from the site. For some, this power can also come from a lust for power.
Ooh, you're saying Lenin had a lust for power?
He might have, or he might have just been so focused on this big encompassing fight that he felt like he had to take power.
Yeah. And as someone who admires a lot of what Lenin did, individual acts aside, I could see the lust for power on behalf of the people. I want the people
cause
to be in charge,
Yeah.
So
finally, we've got Mao Zedong. This one might be my favorite one because I feel like it really tracks.
Ooh, all right.
Okay, so his sun sign is Capricorn, and I originally did not know a lot about Capricorns. I think I only have one friend who's a Cap, and I just like haven't looked into it much. So this involves some research.
All right.
So Capricorns, their symbol is the goat, and that's kind of their whole deal, is they're very about getting things done, like slow and steady, not into frivolous things. They are hardworking. They want to be recognized for their efforts, and they can be kind of reserved and standoffish because they're just so focused on like tasks.
All right. So you're saying with Mao that would fit?
I think so. I mean, he seemed very, maybe not practical isn't the right word, but like he wanted to get some shit done no matter what.
Yeah, he was dedicated. I mean, you see,
dedicated, yes.
Once he figures out, I'm going to be a revolutionary. I mean, he's doing all, you remember the bookstore thing, he's in these different organizations and stuff. He's doing local organizing. And then, I mean, he just doesn't turn back at that point. Once he figures out that, that's going to be what he does. So yeah, I guess I could see that.
One thing I didn't like in this description, like one of the traits was possibly they don't like to take risks. And I'm like, nah, dude, this guy like put it all out there. He did not give a fuck.
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely a risk taker.
Yes. All right. This one, though, this is, I think, the piece de resistance of this segment.
Ooh.
Moon sign in Leo. So remember, this is internal stuff.
Okay.
He wants to be a fucking star. Leos are all about, I want to be the center of attention. I want validation. And this is the quote that made me lose my shit and text you. Quote, maybe you should admit your fear of criticism and your inability to accept criticism. It is very important to accept feedback and use it for improvement. Do not try to only make excuses for yourself.
Oh, shit. Damn. I feel like, so after Mao was gone, they had like a party conference, and Maoists kind of don't like this party conference because they kind of go back and kind of criticize what Mao did because they're moving in like the reformist direction,
Yeah, that's right.
And they say, Mao, great guy, he did really good things, he's the reason we were successful, he's a big part of it anyway. And they say, he did 70% good things and 30% bad. I feel like they could like instead just have said like that, like maybe you should have been more accepting
Not the
of criticism.
Best. Yes, it's accepting criticism. Like my critique of you is that.
Nice.
But yeah, generally kind of dramatic in that way. I think that's perfect. Rising is Capricorn again. And, that idea of self-control, wanting to do things correctly, still wanting recognition, but again, kind of practical and goal oriented. So kind of repeats itself there.
That one is...
But double Capricorn, man. He likes to get shit done.
Yeah. And I think that for that one, maybe... Wait, is Rising, so that's like, which one's that?
That's what people see.
People see.
Like their impression of you.
Okay. He wants to make sure. I mean, and making sure to get things right. That's like the criticism and self-criticism thing that he would, that the party would use, and then the downside of that is not taking that criticism himself very well.
All right. So those are the big three. We've got plenty more to get through, and I'd like to start doing this for all of our biographies because they're fucking funny.
Yes.
Some of them don't fit at all. And also some of them like weren't on the celebrity list. So I had to just like enter their info.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because one of them, I looked up like Fred Hampton's and it was like, see your compatibility with Fred. And I was like, no, I'm good.
That's funny.
So yeah.
Dude, great work. We're going to keep doing this because it's funny. And the great thing about it is if it is wrong, we just ignore that.
It doesn't matter. It's fake. Okay, let's get into our real shit today, and that's listener questions.
Yeah, we're opening up the mailbag.
Hell yeah. Dumped it out onto our table. We sorted through it. We took out all the death threats, and yeah, we left the good ones.
Yeah, they were all like return addressed to Langley, Virginia. I don't know what that was about.
Super weird.
Yeah.
All right, so this is from Kate, and she said... I'm listening to your second Irish episode and am a bit surprised you didn't include more information about the British colonization of Ireland. That it wasn't/isn't Protestant versus Catholic, but rather an occupation of stolen land. She goes on to say that the famine wasn't actually a famine and that there's plenty of food, but like the British shipped all the food back to England or kept it for the invading persons and let the Irish die of starvation when the only crop they were allowed to eat became inedible. They were literally, quote, solving the Irish problem. And the island's population went from 8 million to 4 million in a very short time. Holy shit, that's insane.
Yeah.
She goes on to explain that the British made it illegal to speak Irish or teach Irish history. Irish people had to smuggle their children into caves to continue teaching their own language and customs. Irish people weren't allowed to hold jobs like banking, teaching, police officer, etc. Basically, the British controlled all facets of Irish life for years and years and years. And she actually compares it to Palestine, which I thought was good.
Yeah.
And I feel like we kind of touched on that in the episode, is that the religious spin on this conflict is very similar to what's happening in Israel and Palestine.
The rest of the question, she goes on to mention that, like, you know, we really didn't focus, or we kind of kept our focus more to highlighting like socialism and its role, whereas the Irish struggle for freedom, she says, was more about oppression, murder, ethnic cleansing, and saying kind of like that the religious role and the socialist role is not as primary.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciated this feedback because like I didn't fucking know anything about Ireland going in, so like this is useful.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely glad for the feedback, kind of the criticism of it. I think we kind of knew going in that our episodes on Ireland were not providing like a complete picture. Especially with the historic, I mean, like we started the historical outline with the Middle Ages and just brushed up to, you know,
like 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely did not cover what Kate is mentioning here with the Great Famine, sometimes just referred to as the Irish potato famine.
Yeah.
The 1840s and 50s. You know, even then though, I think we could have done more to highlight this, you know, what's at the core of the story: British settler colonialism, imperialism, and, you know, occupation of this stolen land, you know, stolen from the Irish people.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe instead of doing that like quick fast forward history of the original settlement, like we could have made that a whole episode even.
Every one of our episodes probably would have been better done a second time.
It's true.
But
yeah.
But no. I think she's made some really good points here. That, you know, Britain invaded Ireland, brutally dominated it, and maintains that domination in Northern Ireland to this day. It's less direct, but it's still there. I mean, they still, like, you know, control the place in a way. And they treated and continue to treat Ireland very much like Europeans treated indigenous people in the Americas, or as mentioned here, the, you know, settler colonial project of Israel.
Yeah.
Treats Palestinians, you know, treating them as lesser people, as a nuisance best disposed of quickly to improve the lives of the colonizers.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they referred to the population as a problem, and like it seems like we're deliberately sabotaging their population, and by sabotaging I mean murdering, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, the specifics mentioned here about the famine, I was kind of looking into that. According to the statistics I was able to find and stuff, and the sources, it looks like they were not exporting a ton of food. That is something that people refer back to. They were exporting some food. Imports exceeded it by a lot, and apparently the amount of food exported in 1846 anyway was only 1/10 of the amount of potato harvest lost to the blight. So people kind of disagree as to how much that would have completely impacted. It's not like a good choice, I don't think. And it's a choice made on behalf of the British. It's still like an imperialist choice to say, let's export food while we're starving. I mean, like, obviously the British are making that decision, not thinking about, let's help the Irish people here who are starving.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, I guess everything is a little more nuanced than, but it's still shitty. So
for sure.
And yeah, like that population number is outrageous, and it's true.
Oh gosh.
It was at over 8 million by 1841, and the 4 million number is by 1931.
Jesus. So 100 years, their population got halved.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That is not an accident. The quote there about the Irish problem, that is how a lot of British politicians saw the situation in Ireland. They saw it as this, they would rather the people there be dead so they could replace them with their own. Ugh. I mean, again, to hammer home the parallels, that's exactly what we see in the apartheid state of Israel.
Yeah. I was thinking, same thing with Native Americans. It's like, oh man, these guys are on our land. It's like, not your land, but okay.
There's a guy named Nassau Sr. who was an economics professor at Oxford University at the time, and he wrote that the famine, quote, would not kill more than 1 million people, and that would scarcely be enough to do any good.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Somebody go piss on his grave.
Charles Trevelyan, a civil servant with most direct responsibility for the government's handling of the famine, described it in 1848 as, quote, a direct stroke of an all-wise and all-merciful providence, which laid bare the deep and inveterate root of social evil.
Wow.
He affirmed that the famine was, quote, the sharp but effectual remedy by which the cure is likely to be effected. God grant that the generation to which this opportunity has been offered may rightly perform its part.
I mean, this is like when people said that Katrina was because there's gay people.
Right, yeah, he's just saying, well, they fucking earned it. So, yeah, no, I mean, they saw that as a problem. As far as forbidding the speaking of Irish and teaching Irish history, from what I could tell, that was not very effectively enforced. But there may have been, instances where it was, and people did have to kind of secretly teach it, or that just was done to avoid conflicts at all, like to avoid police trouble,
Yeah, I mean, the fact though that was even a law, like that fucking sucks.
Yeah, and there was very much this effort at, keeping at bay the inferior Irish culture for the superior British culture. Like, in the same way that European colonizers were trying to exterminate and then later assimilate, like, the Native American population. There's parallels there too. So
yeah, and that's absolutely a tactic, is banning language, banning religion. I know that was a thing in Mexico as well. So yeah,
it's all part of that pattern. I will say on what we were covering, on the role of socialism, I do think that eventually, socialists did play a significant, but definitely not like dominant role in the Irish Republican movement. And I we kind of talked about that, how it wasn't like the central thing all the time.
Yeah.
I would offer that I do think their analysis of the situation was correct. If you don't also overthrow capitalism when you overthrow the imperialist British, you're going to, kind of like how Connolly said, you're going to be evicted by Irish landlords and thrown in jail by Irish cops and have your labor stolen by Irish bosses, which is an improvement, an important one. We want to fight imperialism, yes, but I think that Republican socialism does offer that like complete picture of what actually truly liberating the Irish people would look like.
Yeah. Like it's the whole do both thing. And like, I think it's important to acknowledge that imperialism is completely wrapped up in capitalism. Like they're best buds. So maybe we didn't do enough hammering on that point, but yeah, I think we were a little more focused on the other side of that.
On kind of specific events too. But yeah, I think that highlighting these kind of like, how did the British initially, come in and fuck up the place? That's
important.
Yeah, very important. And thank you, Kate, for bringing that up.
That was really interesting to learn about. So yeah, thank you.
All right, next up.
All right, so our next question is from Ash, and they say, I absolutely love the podcast. Thank you, Ash.
Thanks.
And I know this is going to sound really dumb, but could you answer what exactly liberalism is at some point in the show? Specifically, how liberalism differs from capitalism. I feel like I should know the difference, but the two seem identical to me.
Fair
Same.
enough.
I understand that capitalism is the use of privately owned capital to create private profit, and liberalism is free markets, freedom to own private property, etc. I don't see how one could exist without the other. This is a great question, Ash. I would love to know the answer to this because in my mind, they're kind of the same thing, or at least they're not opposing things.
Oh, they're definitely not opposing things. That's right.
They're best friends.
All right. Yeah. Great observation. Essentially, Ash, you got this right. Capitalism is the economic system and liberalism is the political system that supports it. So capitalism, very good summary here. It's where, the means of production, capital, the stuff we use to make goods and services. Sometimes they just call this the economy, right? Is privately owned, and the wealth that it produces is distributed privately. So the whims of its owners, they figure out, I'm going to keep 50% of this for my own, just to waste on stuff. And I'm going to use I'm going to invest the other 20% or 35% on stock buybacks, and then I'm going to pay the rest of my workers, whatever.
Yeah. Real quick. I saw this great Instagram post the other day, and it was about gender, and some guy thought he totally had it owned. He was like, gender is a social construct, but we need it like money. If you didn't have money, you couldn't survive. I'm like, well, you could. What if we didn't have money?
Human history before, prehistory, I guess, but before money.
He totally thought he won. I was like, oh, that's cute.
You feel for him. I mean,
yeah. No gender, no money. Let's do it.
I'm on board. That's fine.
It sounds great.
That's capitalism. So liberalism, the way most of the world and so most leftists refer to it as liberalism, is basically the belief in representative democracy, the rule of law, civil liberties, property rights, free markets, free trade, limited government, that sort of thing. All right. So again, good summary there. That's, liberalism is that kind of political system. It was the political philosophy advocated by the rising bourgeoisie back in the day when they were first getting started, the first, growing capitalist class. And it was the political system that they built once they took power from the old system of feudalism. Once the bourgeoisie was in charge, they set up, liberal democracies.
I'm a little confused because you mentioned limited government, but I thought liberals kind of wanted a big government, or is that just not for financial?
Oh, no, you're kind of correct. So it's because you're an American. We're Americans. We have the conception of, we just call liberalism what is also called modern liberalism, or sometimes just called Americanism. But modern liberalism is like this free market liberal democracy plus a general social safety net and progressive social policies.
Okay, because I was like, that sounds a little more like libertarian to me.
Right, yeah.
Free market, small government.
And that's, sometimes they'll call that classical liberalism, just to distinguish between modern and, New Deal-ish style American liberalism versus, old school. But that's what, modern American liberalism evolved from. There was this kind of philosophical change of we're still about, protecting people's property rights and stuff like that, but we also need to make sure that people survive, I guess.
Yeah, you don't want to change the whole fucking system, you just want to make it a little nicer.
Right, yeah. But classical liberalism, especially when leftists use it, the term, we tend to be talking about people supporting, the overall free market capitalist system with what political system they've built.
Okay, so modern liberalism, that's neoliberal too, right?
That encompasses it, yeah.
I feel like neoliberalism has an imperialist flavor to it. Is that part of that too?
So neoliberalism is sometimes hard to define.
Many. I need a chart.
Because neoliberalism is
I feel like it's just conservatism, but
yes,
okay.
So it's not it's almost classical liberal. It's like going back and privatizing things and stuff, we used to do all these welfare programs for people. We're just going to, sell that off, or we're just going to deregulate this or whatever. That's bringing back
neoclassicalism.
Right. Yeah. So
Got it.
It's kind of like that, I think. And it also has to do with just imposing your will on the world and stuff.
Yeah. Being a dick. Ugh. Okay. Man, these sound all so terrible. I guess the point of conservatism at this point is just you get to do those things and also be racist and sexist and shit.
I mean, I would argue that they're both within, American liberals and American conservatives have obviously one's better than the other, but both are within the liberal democracy that we're in. I mean, they're both in the umbrella term of kind of liberalism of, like we said, representative democracy. Okay, they're both more or less on board with that.
Sort of.
The rule of law, both sides can
they
kind
love
of
laws.
can hearken to that. Civil liberties to varying
some
extents. Yeah. Property rights, free markets, free trade, limited government even. I mean, liberals
for sure.
will be the first to, well, what about small businesses? But what about, the crazy amount of choice we have and all these sorts of capitalist things.
Interesting.
So they don't want, the government to do everything. Now, I will say liberalism, it supports the interests of the capitalist class and the capitalist system as a whole, right? I mean, that's clear with what it supports.
Yeah.
Free markets and property rights and stuff. That's like sacrosanct in liberalism. But the part of the question, could capitalism survive without liberalism, I thought was interesting. How could one exist without the other, basically?
Yeah.
I would argue that capitalism could survive without liberalism. Not necessarily as a pure form of free market capitalism, but that's not even what we have right now. So I think that it would just be there with some modifications,
Okay. Can't what?
You could have capitalism under fascism.
Oh, good.
Right? Or a military dictatorship. You could have those. In fascism, I mean, you could still have private ownership of a whole lot of industries, as long as they're willing to go along with whatever the state says. Hey, you have to do this now. Okay, but there's no reason why the state can't just let them, mostly be in charge unless they cross the party line or something.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Or with military dictatorship, similar thing. I mean, as long as everybody gets their kickbacks, then we're good. Yeah.
Shit. Okay.
But I think, as Lenin said in The State and Revolution, capitalism does prefer a democratic republic as the best possible political shell.
Yeah, I remember that quote.
It allows wealth to dominate the government so thoroughly. I mean, we definitely see that.
Yeah, and I think it's effective because it gives that guise of freedom and democracy, and people are like, oh, it's fine. It gives you, because if you're living straight up in a dictatorship, you're more likely to be pissed about it and try to revolt.
Yeah.
Where here it's I get to vote, so I have power, and it's well, sort of.
Right. Yeah. The most important thing you can do, So and it also, I guess, an aspect of what you're saying there is it discourages direct action, right?
Yes.
It's you're kind of breaking the system. That's not how it's supposed to work. There's a way that you influence it, and that's by going and voting and influencing your legislators.
Sure. Do it if you have time for it, but don't put all your eggs in that basket, in my opinion. The basket is on fire, so you can do that if you want, but I don't know.
Yeah, priorities. But Ash, awesome question.
I never really thought about how they're basically the same, or at the very least propping each other up very nicely.
Yeah, they're twins.
Ugh, terrible twins.
And they were kind of birthed out of the same time and everything. They have supported each other. Like I said, it's not indispensable. Capitalism is a tenacious beast and can continue under a lot of circumstances. But
yeah, and if you look at the revolutions that were popping off during that time, they were led by liberalism, but also with wanting to keep capitalism. That totally tracks.
Yeah.
Next, we've got a question from Olivia, and she says, I'm not sure if you've covered this yet, as I'm still working my way through the available episodes, but how would hospitals, emergency services, firefighters, paramedics, etc., mental health services, access to medications, etc., work under socialism and communism? We've touched on this a lot. I mean, we're obviously for Medicare for all.
Yeah.
But we haven't ever gotten into specifics, I guess. So what do you think?
I think that here again, we're being bad Marxists. We like to speculate. Yeah. It depends on what type of socialism you're working with. And the way to think about this, the more I think of it, is not different camps that should be opposed to each other, but just different paths to the same one true communism that you'll eventually get to in the end,
Yeah.
If you're looking like social democratic.
Furthest in, I almost said, what are we most likely to get to? But
Yes, honestly.
That's a boys' dream.
Because social democratic, I mean, this is like, the way we characterize this is kind of almost like your furthest left version of capitalism, really. Because you don't really want to change the capital system. You still want private ownership, right, of the means of production, the economy. You just want to distribute those resources more fairly.
Yeah.
So more regulations, more taxes. Our taxes are here. You will be satisfied. And then that will be used to pay for everyone to have health care and other emergency services. This is what the proposal for Medicare for All, boils down to.
Yeah.
It's still saying we're going to, pay for things. You just make sure that everyone is getting enough of the wealth that capitalism is producing to get their basic services.
Yeah. I tweeted this the other day. I just filed my taxes, and apparently when you write a book, they tax you really badly because you're just like an individual person making money.
Yeah.
So I paid a lot, and I was like, man, I'd feel so much better about this if this was like going towards healthcare and not like, drones heading towards Palestine or something.
Yeah. You're buying them some fancy new fighter jets and all sorts of crazy dystopian technology to track everyone every second of their lives over there. So
sorry, y'all.
Fun stuff. Anyway, that's kind of the most reformist sort of version of it, right? And that would, I think, in any of these that I'm going to be talking about, we're talking about covering completely anything regarding hospitals, emergency services, mental health services, medications, all that.
All
100%.
That shit.
And more.
Yeah.
Housing, all that.
Oh, yeah. I always think about this as so much as the silver bullet. Like, just that takes off so much debt and concern. And it, to me, really addresses the fundamental question of, like, I think people deserve to live. Like,
yes.
I think we should try to keep people alive. And that seems like a pretty basic tenet of government, but you'd be surprised.
Yeah. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If you're taking kind of a democratic socialism approach or more anarchist socialism or libertarian socialism, so you're thinking like,
little know-me.
Less state involvement, right?
Yeah. Popular
involvement. Yeah, a little know-me, yeah. So in this system, you'd have popular democratic control of the economy. We're talking about your workplace, entire industries owned and run by the workers and not the bosses. Whether that's democratically through like the government or at the local level, like the local firm sort of level, whatever. Either way that could be done. We would produce things and distribute them socially, democratically. So we would have healthcare and emergency services, democratically run, either just, this is our like worker-owned, worker-operated hospital or what have you. Or perhaps, you could do it at the national level sort of thing if you wanted to in this kind of federated system. Either way, they'd be run just as services. It kind of depends on who you ask as far as like the particulars of what you want to do. But people would democratically decide how to allocate health care and emergency services. And I think since people aren't stupid, and since, they want to do the right thing in large enough numbers, they would make sure that everyone has all these things at no cost to be universal and free.
Okay. So, like, it would technically still be up to a vote. But, like, even if you looked at the numbers now, like, what is it? Like, 80% of people are like, I would like healthcare, please.
More than half of Republicans even or something,
Yeah, I think it was 80 Democrats and, like, more than half of Republicans, which is, most people.
Yes, just humans are like, oh, going to the doctor would be free? Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, I guess, you still run a risk of your particular, I guess it's not a commune, your particular community of some sort saying like, nah, we're not into it. But
right.
I guess that would suck. I don't know what to do about that. But, okay, so basically your hospital's worker run and the community decides this is going to be free.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And if you do more of a state direction, socialism with like a workers' commune or workers' state sort of thing, dictatorship of the proletariat, sometimes people say it, more Marxist-Leninist style. This would be one of the workers' state or workers' commune's function, right? It would, so you'd just have a general fund, right, where all everything in the economy is now collectively owned by the worker state, by the people.
Yeah.
And so the wealth that it produces is just in the general fund and then like given to people to take care of whatever they need, right? So one of the things would be to make sure that we provide health care for people, including everything that we mentioned there, including emergency services, all that, like education or pension or housing or anything else people need. That would, I guess, again, be decided democratically. Like the whole thing here, and I guess this is where Marx has a strength, is that he just says like, when they get to it, people will figure it out. But like a lot of this boils down to, if we think that the people should be in charge, then they should be in charge. We can say like, I think they should do X, Y, or Z, but ultimately we kind of support them doing what they want.
So like maybe an example would be like if you got everyone together and everyone agreed like, no, we're not going to cover, plastic surgery, even though there's valid reasons to want to get plastic surgery. And I think like do whatever the fuck you want with your body. But if everyone voted on it, like that could be a scenario where like maybe that's not covered or something.
It's one example, but yeah, in general, they could decide things that way. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you do run into problems of people, how do you make sure that everyone, that even more unpopular groups make sure that they, get what they need? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's my concern. I think I would be very watchful of like disability rights and stuff. And like, I would just want to make sure that everyone is covered. I don't want anything to be left out. And, things like gender affirming care, like the trans population is very small. So like, I wouldn't want them to just like not get it because there's not enough of them to vote for it,
That's true. Yeah. I don't know not sure how to handle that.
I mean, I don't know either. And then I think that's what kind of confuses me about some of these like democracy above all platforms. It's like, well, I would maybe be more okay with that if like, this is going to sound weird, if you had some propaganda maybe to go with it, of like maybe some educational campaigns of like, here's why we should do this. Like, I don't like just letting it up to chance. I'm a little scared of that.
Yeah. My first instinct is admittedly real liberal one. It's just like, well, we can put together like a charter of rights sort of thing. And it's like, you have democracy, but you also have to do these things. Yeah. But the problem is like, well, you have to figure out what those things are and get everyone to say, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. That's just something I've always like thought about as like, we have minority populations and we need to watch out for them. And I don't know. I mean, I know that capitalism obviously exacerbates our divisions and stuff like that. But like at the end of the day, you still do have these gaps in populations, and that worries me.
Yeah. One way we could do it is word everything, like in that charter or whatever, word everything to be this almost kind of vague, like pro-human rights in general sort of thing, and then just get you like communists, judges and stuff to interpret that in a good way, So when people try to take away their rights, just be like, actually, this one clause says, no, you can't do that. Sorry, you suck.
Yeah, like I like how the Church of Satan does this. One of their tenets is just like, yeah, you've got control over your body. So they're like pro-abortion and shit and like pro-trans rights. And like, that's one of their main tenets.
Yeah.
We'll just all become Satanists. That's the next step.
I don't know how that one polls, but
that one's got a PR problem.
All right. Finally, we talked about all these different paths, right? Okay. Eventually, we'll get to true communism.
That luxury gay space.
Yeah. Once society has improved its productive forces, meaning we can make enough stuff for everybody to have things, right? We've moved from our infancy, beyond our primitive struggle for survival, beyond scarcity.
I think I'm going to make a den in my house and call it the luxury gay space. Just have like a nice shiny purple couch, some mood lighting, some bisexual lighting. It's going to be good.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's my office, basically.
There you go. Once we get there, people get everything they need for free, not just these services we're mentioning here, but everything also that they need for their survival and everything they want at that point. I mean, they'll no longer have to work to survive. They'll just be working based on their interest, on their own kind of self-fulfillment, which is interesting because like it might take some coaxing to get people to like put the insane amount of work needed to become a medical professional in that world. I'm lazy, so I'm thinking like, why would I do that?
Okay,
just
I'm
chill.
not sure, because if you think about, sorry, there's a fucking peacock going nuts in my yard right now, so sorry if you can hear them, just yelling. But okay, I was reading a tweet about this, doing some heavy research.
Yeah.
But there's talking about how medical school, it's super normalized, like you said, to be really, really hard. Like, you don't sleep, you are pushing your body to these extremes. And it's like, hey, no wonder they're not great at like dealing with people with disabilities and chronic illness and shit like that, because they have this kind of get over it mentality about like health in a way. Like, it encourages people to push themselves, and kind of by default then blocks people with disabilities who maybe can't be on their feet all day from getting into the field. So if we have a system that like provides for people enough, I think it could be good. I think we could learn like, hey, maybe you don't have to work like 20-hour shifts at the hospital. Like,
Yeah. Because we could also, this could all be like, from today's perspective, crazily overstaffed. How many doctors could we afford to put through medical school because we're not putting people through business school?
yeah. We're not doing military. We're not doing business. We're not doing marketing. Like, well, we'll have a little propaganda station probably.
Sure, but so many people whose like, passions are crushed into these other, nobody grows up and says, oh, damn, I want to be a telemarketer, It's just something you have to do. And it's, do it if you have to do it, but you'll just have fewer people in those fields, like insurance salesmen or various other things. You'll have so many more people that can say, actually, I'm going to do this thing that I want. And so like you can have slower paced medical schools because you're not trying to rush people. People aren't trying to rush out themselves so that they can hurry up and start paying off their mountains of debt. Yeah. It would change a whole lot about it.
And you do have people who like kind of don't care about their jobs, and I think that's great. I always encourage that.
For sure.
And I think that's still an option too. Like, if you're like, yeah, I work in insurance and I don't give a shit, like, sure, now you work in sanitation, but like, it's not backbreaking. You're just like doing work for this amount of hours. It's probably less hours, and guess what? You're taken care of. Yeah. Like, you get to just fucking zone out and do your thing and go home.
And yeah, once you're in like true pro-scarcity, whatever we can't automate, then we have to take shifts on, basically.
It's all going to be easier.
Yeah, and in the socialist world, like, it would still be that sort of, you're taken care of sort of thing. Like, you would do a job even if it's like, it's not my passion. I'm not like super about this, but you'd have so much provided for you. And
you'd have so much more time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were talking about this. We were watching Star Trek the other day, and we're like, clearly they're post-scarcity in a way, and they still have these super ambitious people in Starfleet and shit. So I think that's kind of interesting. I really want to do a Star Trek episode.
I don't know if I just have to watch more of it to get like more of a breadth, because it's just such a big body of work that it's like.
So yeah, I feel like we covered it. We talk about health a lot on this show in terms of like, it should be better, but like, this was nice to kind of break it down into like the specific ways it could be better. Yeah, and these are all, ideas, I guess. As Mark says, obviously you got to figure it out in the context of what actually happens. To boil it down to just the basics, though, we want everything covered for everybody. We both want to do that like as fast as possible, as like dramatic as possible, instead of like, oh, here we're going to pay your insurance company some more or something. We really want to make sure everybody has all of the hospital care, mental health service, everything, like free medications, 100%. I think I do lean a little more maybe federalized on this one. Like national level, you mean? National level, okay. I guess. Yeah. Just because like if you're in a full commune, like I don't want like just an herbalist because that's all I got, Like, no offense to herbalists, like there's some good herbalists out there, I'm sure, but like, I don't know, it's science. I would like scientists, please. Okay, yeah. Just, I don't want someone to be in a neighborhood like that just doesn't have a doctor. Oh, that's true. Yeah, you would have to have, the doctor's brigades at least to go out and like a traveling doctor. Yeah, or I don't know. You'd have to cover areas that don't have that. Which is a problem today too. Like you have rural areas with like no hospitals. Yeah. So even in a decentralized system, where they talk about a system free associating
doing like delegates and stuff to like a higher federation. It's like not really a state, but kind of quasi sort of state.
Yeah.
That would be very useful for pooling those sorts of resources and making sure that people, doctors and medical facilities get to where they need to go.
Yeah, and you could like pay those doctors a little extra, like, hey, you have to live out here, and maybe it's not where you wanted to live, but like we'll cover your moving expenses and shit, and it's a lot easier now too, I think, because of technology to like work wherever you need to. So
yeah, that's true.
Next, we have a question from Steven, and he wants to know what we think about L3Cs, which are low profit limited liability companies. And I have no idea what these are. So tell me, what do I think about these things, Grady?
So I didn't know what these were either. I looked this up. They look like a version of a nonprofit.
I traditionally don't like those.
Right. It's a nonprofit that is allowed to do a little profit.
All right. I don't think I'm going to like this.
So basically, it's similar in that it does have a social mission, but they're like a for-profit company. They're companies that are legally mandated to be sort of nice.
Why?
Why do they exist, right?
Why?
Good question. All right. So from what I can tell, which is not a ton, I'm not legally trained or anything, a big part of the idea behind the creation of L3Cs as a legal category was to make it easier for them to get grant money from charitable foundations.
Wait, why not just have more charitable foundations or bigger ones?
Because that wasn't the problem they were trying to solve.
Okay.
Basically, what they did was they matched up the requirements to be a L3C with the IRS's requirements for charitable foundations, that they have to, when they grant money to projects and stuff, it has to qualify as a project-related investment. And this sounds arcane, but here it goes. So, tax-exempt charitable foundations, they're required to pay at least a whopping 5% of their funds to a charitable project each year.
Sorry. This is any charity?
Yeah, like a foundation, like I don't know if there's a difference between the foundations and the charities.
A foundation and a nonprofit?
There's a difference between that because they usually donate to the nonprofit orgs. So think like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They give a bunch of money to some nonprofit organization to go do a thing in Africa or something.
Okay. God, this is just so much money changing hands, guys.
Well, not so much. It's only 5%.
Apparently it's only 5%.
But anyway, they have to do that every year. They do this very few times to one or more nonprofit organization, because if they mess it up, they get fined like crazy. If the IRS is like, no, this investment doesn't qualify as a project-related investment, then they get fined a bunch of money. So they're very careful about it. So usually what they do beforehand, they get something called a private letter of ruling. They ask the IRS beforehand, hey, can we do this? And the IRS gives them a letter guaranteeing that, yeah, you can do this.
This one's fine.
Right.
They being an L3C, right?
No.
God dang it. Who is this? Who's the they?
All right. The charitable organization.
Okay.
They're like, we got to give away 5% of our money. We're going to give it to this organization. We want to make sure with the IRS that it's fine. So they ask the IRS, and the IRS says yes.
Okay, gotcha.
That is a slow and expensive process. I mean, the IRS is doing this for everybody, and you have to pay lawyers to put together your paperwork. All
that shit.
Yeah. So the L3C was designed to get around that by automatically qualifying them as, in the eyes of the IRS, because they use the exact same definition.
Okay.
Right? So the idea was, well, the IRS will say these guys are good, and so charitable foundations will donate to them, and so people will want to be L3Cs, and that way they can get this grant money.
Okay.
All right. But it actually didn't work out that way. The IRS has not ruled, and this happened a while back, but they have not ruled that they automatically qualify, so they still have to do that slow process.
Okay, this is such a waste of fucking time.
Yeah. In the end, a L3C is like a light form of a nonprofit. If you like nonprofits, but you wish they had a little bit more entrepreneurial capital spirit in them,
I don't.
then maybe L3Cs are for you.
They're not.
No, they're not for you.
I'll pass.
If you like corporations, but wish they were just a little bit nicer, again, here's your deal.
No.
Not too much nicer, but a little bit nicer.
No, I want them gone.
Yeah. If you're like us, you want to solve our problems through collective action and transform our entire economic and social and political system into one that's run democratically by the people instead of some arcane IRS corporate machinations. We have an alternative for you, a little thing called communism.
Yeah, like instead of making like 20 laws about like percentages and how much you need to pass around or whatever, what if you just like fucking gave people what they need so we wouldn't have to have all these like random corporations?
Yeah, and again, this touches on kind of our episode on charity, and the shortcomings of that is that you're looking to navigate all these, again, just really complex and ridiculous kind of rules that are set forth. Also that you can have the extra step of, making sure that a rich guy gets to do what he wants with the money before it goes to the people who earned it.
Apparently there's a Warren Buffett documentary on Amazon, of course.
Ooh.
My mother-in-law was trying to get me to watch it, be like, he gives away all of his money. And I'm like, it's not enough. He needs to give away all of it. Like,
yeah.
I'm just like, you still don't see that, like, one day he could wake up and say, no, I'm not going to give away this money. Like,
right.
That's not okay. He's not God.
Right. Yeah. We should worship this guy for deigning to keep people alive with the money that he stole from them in the first place.
It's just clearly propaganda, and it makes me really mad.
That's kind of the rundown of the L3Cs.
They sound bad.
Well, they're as bad as like they're, I guess, a little worse than nonprofits, a little better than corporations, but
I mean,
not the
low
solution.
bar.
Not the solution.
Next, we have a couple questions from some students. We actually got a few in these kind of veins, so I kind of combined them. But in general, we got questions about like how to get people interested in communism. And these are coming from like teenagers and stuff.
Yeah.
And also just like on the other side of that, kind of how to hide being a communist. Because like, if you run around saying things like, hey, communism's cool, and then like you grow up in a Western society where it's not really accepted, like you're going to get made fun of.
That can happen.
Yeah.
I guess neither one of us really experienced that as kids because we weren't communists yet.
We were dirty liberals.
Yeah.
I got made fun of for phone banking for Obama.
Oh, what a loser.
One of my, I say friends, but it's just friends of convenience. Yeah. Called me a traitor.
Nice.
Like a race traitor.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Oof. Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Anyway.
All right. Yeah. What you got?
All right. So.
Tips and tricks.
Tips for spreading communism. Trying to spread that good word. Yeah. Love it.
Have you heard the good news of Marx?
So that's my first point is I wouldn't open with Marx. Like, not very accessible to most folks. Like, it's okay, but like, I remember going through that and being like, wow, this is taking me forever to read. Like,
yeah.
It's a banger once you have someone explain it to you, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, kind of a later stage sort of thing. Once you got them hooked on some sort of an intro. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would also go ahead and check out, we have an episode called like How to Convert a Liberal. That's episode 42. I'll go ahead and listen to that in the archives.
Yeah.
We go over lots of just general advice, but for like specifically this kind of stuff, especially like I think with younger people, you probably want to just stay away from the scholarly material and just start getting them to kind of question and think about maybe other people through a different lens. I know I'm a very selfish person. I definitely was even more selfish growing up because like your experience is all you know. You're only exposed to so much when you're younger.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think just pointing out like inequities and be like, hey, isn't that fucked up that like, that person can't afford this or whatever it is, like.
Or like that could be getting people to realize that they could very easily be in a different situation. Like that could be me, especially at younger ages where you're kind of still struggling with just pure empathy overall. That's still kind of like a mind blowing thing sometimes. You're like, oh man, there are other people. Like I still get that now. Damn, everyone's the protagonist in their own story. But saying, oh well, that could be me. If just a few things were different.
I know we just spent like 30 minutes shitting on liberalism, but like this is something it kind of does okay, especially recently, is like talking about privilege. And that's a really useful term for just like letting people know like, hey, you fucking won the lottery. You were born in America. You're white. Like you're doing great. Depending on where you live, obviously adjust as needed.
Sure.
Yeah. Just being able to point out those inequities. And like, I think for me, at least the first step was realizing like, hey, this is fucked up. And that took a while.
Yeah.
I was one of those people that like didn't really realize how fucked it was until 2016. And like, that's okay. I got there eventually. But like, it's important to like kind of wake up first.
Yeah.
And then kind of start asking more questions of like, hey, what if we had healthcare?
Yeah. And I think that's an important like starting point. I think that one of the bridges to kind of more leftism, right? Kind of getting them over to socialism, communism is once you have kind of started making people realize this shit is fucked up, right? This system is doing such bad things to so many people in our country, in the world. I think that once they really have come to believe that, it becomes harder for people to justify like, well, there's only so much we can do, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to even point it out because our education system purposely hides those things. We don't talk about Native Americans being slaughtered. We don't talk about like all the imperialism in South America. Like we don't address these issues. And even like economically, like we try to hide homeless people. We try to put them away. We try to get them off the streets. We try to, service workers, we tried to completely alienate them and, make them invisible with things like Uber Eats and shit like that. There's a real concerted effort to like separate us. And so whenever you start pointing that out, it just kind of opens your eyes to like, wow, there are all these people that are like drastically affected by this. And yeah, it's again, just building up that empathy muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. Because once it's strong enough, then you can say, I get that there's, this constitutional amendment, this particular law that says we can't do it, but like we should be able to change that. Like, are you going to say that those people like have to continue to suffer because of something that somebody wrote in the 1780s? Like, come on, we could do better.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is like, for me, it just kind of came up to a breaking point of like realizing how fucked up things were where that like the status quo just wasn't going to do it. And like, we can't just keep doing the same fucking things, expecting different results. Like, it's just, as people love to give excuses for capitalism and all the human nature arguments, all like we've gone over those. Like, it just is untenable at this point for me. So get them very mad for a long time. And then I would say like start suggesting maybe ideas without theory is what I would call it. Just being like, hey, what if we took care of people? Hey, what if, your healthcare is free? What if transportation was better? What if we didn't have climate change? Like kind of saying like we could do these things. Again, kind of taking out of that like, well, we have laws or whatever, taking out of that context, be like, we could just fucking do it. Like,
why don't we just do those things and then let them know you chose socialism?
By the way, I don't know exactly when you would drop that bomb on them.
You don't have to, honestly.
You don't have to. I don't really care what you call yourself,
That's just a decision on your end. Yeah, those are awesome tips, I think, in terms of spreading. You got any more of them? Or
I have some kind of on the flip side of that question was like how to hide being a communist, because we've all been there.
Yep. It's important.
It's getting harder for me by the day. I swear to God, my company's doing like white supremacy, like dismantling white supremacy workshops right now. And I pretty much bring up imperialism in every meeting. And I'm just like, yeah, here's how like capitalism upholds this. And like, I love to look at the Zoom window and see who nods. Yeah. It's really fucking funny. One of them, I couldn't do it because like both my bosses were in there. And I was like, I'm going to be quiet on this meeting.
So you want each boss to be like kind of wondering, but they're like, well, the other boss would have said something if they're a communist.
One of them was my boss and one of them was like the fucking head of my department. And I was like, I'm going to play it cool in this one.
Yeah, fair enough.
But there were some smaller groups that like didn't have them. So like, yeah, I was trying to sniff out who's cool in there. But no, yeah, I generally try to hide it, which is hard because like, I mean, also practically this podcast takes up a lot of our time. So it's like, what'd you do this weekend? And I'm like, didn't talk about communism for 3 hours. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, I was just reading some articles is a lot of times how I'll phrase
just read
hours of research.
Just reading. But how to hide it. In general, I think it's about like assessing your environment. I mean, like the example I just gave, like you have to keep yourself safe and make sure you survive because you can't go on to spread communism if you are, being bullied if you are risking losing your job or something. Like, you got to make sure you make it through the day.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do that when I'm teaching. And that's also just professionalism in my space, because it's like, I don't want to be indoctrinating. That's not really my job.
Yeah. You're trying to get the facts in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally that's my number one rule here. Just keep yourself safe. Don't get yourself in any major trouble. And I will also say, since like several of these questions came from young people, like, being a teenager kind of sucks.
Yeah.
You're in this weird zone where like you are starting to have these like mature thoughts and like, you know, becoming your own person, but everyone still sees you as a kid, and it's just like annoying. And like, I get it. Like, I fucking hated my teen years, but like, you know, good news, you're going to get out of them one day. So like, keep it up.
There's some okay spots in it too, but you're right. And it's kind of
you
aggravating.
You were popular. I was not.
It's, I don't know. It's also kind of aggravating that like people are, like you said, they're still treating you kind of like a kid, but they're also demanding kind of that you grow up too. They're like, you better do this. You got to do that. Come on. Like, you're almost an adult, but they're also like, hey, asshole, you can't do this, you know?
I would also say no when it's worth it. You know, you can poke at people's beliefs like we were talking about earlier without like totally converting them into being a bona fide, you know, Marxist-Leninist MLM, which I'm fucking still laughing over. You can convert them to be gay though if you want.
That's fine.
But you know, sometimes it's not safe to do it, and sometimes it's just like not worth it. Like, I don't know. I always have to make that calculus of like, if I hear them say something that's like 5% fucked up, I might push back a little and be like, oh, I don't know, like, maybe it's hard for homeless people to get a job because they don't have an address, or just something small that's like, have you considered this specific obstacle? And they'll be like, oh no, I haven't thought about that.
One good technique to do that is to pawn off what you're telling them to somebody else.
Ooh, I was reading an article.
Yeah, I was reading an article, or, you know, well, like sometimes people will ask me, you know, students will ask me like kind of a question that has some political like, you know, weight to it. And they're like, well, you know, some people say that blah, 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 versus,
some people,
you know, other people. And I try to give like the other side of it too, and just set them up there and just be like, here are the things, you know, and kind of keep a more or less neutral appearance while still kind of giving them a really good point versus, you know, you don't have to give both sides. I'm just doing that because I'm a teacher. But like, if you were doing this with just a regular person, you can be like, oh yeah, I read somewhere that, you know, this, and it sounded kind of fucked up, you know?
Yeah, you can definitely pawn it off or just present it more neutrally than like, I think this, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just like remembering how stupid I was in high school, actually.
So that's another thing that I did want to talk about.
I'm not calling these listeners stupid. You're obviously very cool and awesome for listening to us, and also just being a person.
But hopefully you will look back in the future and think, oh man, I was a completely different person. I, you know, how could I have ever, you know, seen the world that way? Or I'm smarter, better than I was then.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. You're going to grow, and that's awesome.
Yeah, well, it's annoying when adults look back and, you know, they tell you in the moment, like, oh, yeah, you're just a kid. You don't know anything. They're usually just talking about themselves, like their opinion about how they were, and they're projecting it to you. And you will do that, too. It's just annoying to hear other people do it to you.
It is,
you know, you're like,
yeah.
Fuck you. You don't know anything about my situation.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to clarify. It's like, I'm not trying to be pejorative here. I'm just like, kind of reminiscing that like, yeah, I thought some stupid things. I did some stupid things in high school, but like, I wish I had known about this stuff then. You know, keep at it, and I commend you. And if you're finding like you're just hitting a wall with people and, you know, you're not really getting a good response from people, maybe think of something else you can do for the cause instead to put your energy towards. You know, you could start thinking about mutual aid and volunteering and shit like that. Like, you don't have to have money to do mutual aid. You can just like, lots of times they'll have events where you can like help them organize things like that. So yeah, you can try to find another outlet for it.
Yeah, you can do the work like that. You can
do the work we should be doing.
Right, yeah. If you don't want to do that much work, you could do the work that we are doing. You could start your own podcast, focus on the issues you want to
I don't want the competition.
And well, yeah, you know,
I'm not cool enough to compete with teens.
Oh, another thing. there's like leftist videos and stuff on TikTok.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
barrage them with TikTok videos.
Hell yeah, do that. Our last question comes from Liza. She's 15, another teen. I love these teens. They're giving me hope for the world.
Yeah.
And she was wondering at what age kids and teenagers would start having to contribute and start having a say in what goes on in the community. Would there be a set age? And, you know, saying that we've talked about how communism would change childcare and teaching, but what about students and actual curriculums? And I think this question is really cool, first off.
There's a lot of things to get into.
See, this is why, like what we were talking about earlier, like I hadn't thought about this particular problem because I'm not like a teenager anymore. So like, that's cool.
Yeah. Because I don't know, I think it presents an interesting tension. Maybe like kids should, I think, have some sort of say in their community. Teenagers as well, young adults as well, obviously. Where would, like you say, where would that start? How should that work? I mean, that's a lot to figure out.
Yeah, I thought about this for a while and I was like, I think you're talking about attention. I think my main source of conflict in this is giving kids autonomy while still protecting them.
Okay.
I think an example that I've heard is, you know, when you're raising kids, like you should probably teach them accurate body part names and like be really open about boundaries. Like they don't have to hug people if they don't want to, stuff like that. Basically teaching them about their own autonomy without scaring them and saying like, this is because someone might try to do something to you, you know, just giving them some vocabulary without like fucking terrifying them.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And in the same way, you know, like the more responsibility you take on in your community or in your like larger political community, I mean, you have to like inform yourself about issues. Like, do you want to read about, you know, police brutality when you're 7?
Yeah. That's the thing is that like, I think it's great to start these conversations pretty early and like talk about activism, talk about like being involved. If you're like in a commune situation, let's say, that probably starts pretty early, but I still want kids to be able to enjoy their childhood and just like not be stuck at community meetings, like fucking voting on things all night. Like that would suck.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that whatever system comes, I personally won't be too much of a fan of like compulsory voting or anything. I think
that's true.
It should be voluntary, you know, and you should still get a large enough slice of the population showing up for something that's actually meaningful.
It should be very easy.
Yeah.
But it should not be mandatory, I guess.
There's also the question of like, when would this start? Should it be like, I don't know, in some ways, maybe it should be more of a gradual scale based on more on human development. I mean, because we were mentioning in the one before, like the biological reason you look back and like, man, I was different is because you like brain-wise were.
Yeah.
What is it, till you're 21 or something or somewhere thereabouts. And everybody, you know, is a little bit different on that specifically, but it's, you know, how would you maybe gradually instead of all at once say, hey, you're an adult now, pay us taxes. That sort of thing.
I think if we're looking at a system that, you know, the education is going to be reformed and like college is going to be fucking free, I think that is a very helpful period. And a lot of people don't get this experience of college because of like financial reasons, but it's a helpful kind of in between stage of like, yeah, you're on your own a little bit, but you don't have a job. Your job is like to learn. And like, it's kind of a nice like incubator before you go out and become like, oh, I have a 9-to-5 and that's my life now.
Yeah. So it's a little more freedom, a little more time on your hands to maybe figure out where you're at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that experience of like, that's kind of when you really try to figure out your shit a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. That's, I guess, coming from our experience, a lot of people do work all the way through college.
Yeah. And like, that's insanely hard. And in this society, that hopefully would not be the case.
Yeah. The part about students, like, regarding curriculum, I thought was interesting.
I thought that was cool.
Like, how would you do that? Because you do want students to have feedback or input in terms of their experience and to have some ownership of their learning experience there, some sort of cooperation. But on the other hand, I think that it does need to be like overall, there should be guideline structures created by like trained educators.
Yeah, because otherwise everyone would be like, yeah, we all voted, we fucking hate math. Like, that's out. We're not learning math anymore.
Math is gone. Canceled.
No more math. But I do think, like, I read a lot of parenting columns, and they talk a lot about how the best way to get kids into, to do better in school is to make them enjoy the process of learning. And the way you do that is by, like, really fostering their interest. So, like, it doesn't matter what kind of books they're reading. The fact that they're reading is awesome. And, like, giving them access to whatever it is they want to pursue is very important, it sounds like. I'm not an expert.
No, that's good. One very basic form of this is doing a choice board. You just come up with a bunch of activities that more or less are in the topic that you're doing, and pick one, and they're way happier to do that than even if you give them like a choice of 3 things. They're way happier to do that because they've chosen it.
I think just incorporating a lot more choice would be great. And like, yeah, there's some subjects where you're not going to have as much choice. It's fucking math. You got to learn math, whatever, move on. But like things like, I'm thinking particularly literature, like why do we have to read all the same books by like dead old white guys? Like, can I just fucking read my book and like have a nice day? Like, like even just like giving them a larger choice list would be helpful. History, having more student-led projects of like, I want to research this specific topic. Like, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, I will say that this would have to be coupled with, as part of a larger educational reform, rebuilding sort of thing.
Yeah.
We need like the amount of teachers we have times 2.
For sure.
Because like, if I'm grading, I'm grading 130 projects, or
That's
I guess 75 or something if they're all partner projects. That's way harder than grading like
a rubric.
Right, yeah. Just grading something off of, they all did this thing. If there's all this variety, it's a harder thing to do.
It's going to take longer, yeah. And I think that, you're totally right. That would have to come with, smaller class sizes, more teachers. And I think the community would definitely have a say too in like what the curriculum involves and how this would work. Yeah.
Again, I think that the guideline part is important just to keep everything on the rails, but I'm not opposed to, I think that it's a good idea. And I think that, to tie this back into, I think that, the conception that socialism and communism have of really, people like to make this stupid criticism that like, Marx never considered human nature, but like he was all about human nature, I think. And
that's
like
his thing. He was a Taurus.
The goal of it is like human self-fulfillment and self-improvement and stuff, and like getting to like do things that are beneficial to you. And I think this is important. Like, we should make sure that as we're developing as humans, when we're children and teens, that should we're not like just subjects. We're not just like, we shouldn't just have to follow rules all the time. We should start at some point gradually kind of taking the reins for ourselves.
I think actually in the documentary last week, Chomsky said something kind of similar, like there are certain kinds of compulsion that are kind of justified. And one of those is the parent-child relationship. Like sometimes you do have to fucking say to a kid, like when I watch my nephew, it's like, because I fucking said so, get in the car,
Yeah.
And, there is a little bit of hierarchy there that you just have to do. I think it's about trying to find a balance. Like, I think you have to raise them with an understanding that like they have certain responsibilities, like, doing chores and getting an education. And some of those chores probably help the whole society, in theory. And like, raise them with that idea of like civics, basically,
Yeah, of your responsibilities to one another, right? Like of we are here not just for ourselves, but for our, we're watching out for each other too, I guess.
That is a cool idea. I like thinking about that. We've had the topic of doing like, what does education look under communism on our list for a long time. And that's because it's a really big fucking question.
Yeah. I think that would be a good one, though.
I don't know how to answer it, but it sounds cool.
Yeah.
To wrap up, I had a few extra shout outs I just wanted to give really quickly. These emails made me smile. So first we have Richard. He is a frequent emailer of ours, and he sent us a nice note about our Chomsky coverage.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he just seems like a cool dude. So thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Shane sent us some cool murals from Ireland, talking about how like they support Palestine and stuff. And like, there's just some sweet ass art too. So take a look at that.
Oh yeah, I saw those. Those are so cool. Also, thank you for the compliment on pronouncing things correctly.
You're so self-conscious of it.
Yes.
I think you do great, but I don't fucking know. So you had me fooled. And you won over Shane too. And finally, Gabriel sent us his paper written for like his PhD, and he used Our Prison's Obsolete as like one of his references. So that's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I haven't gotten around to reading yet, full disclosure, but, you know, I'm busy. I'll get to it. Eventually.
I expect a summary from you. I'll read it too, actually, just to do that.
No, yeah, I need to. I've been cranking on that book this weekend. Ugh.
I got time now. The summer has arrived for me.
You don't have time. You have to research all of our other shit. We're going to cover all the big ones this summer. This is the summer of communism.
That's good. I hope it is.
That's a good dream.
That would be lovely.
You heard it here first, listeners.
Thank you guys, everyone, for your questions, for your comments, for your feedback. All of it. So appreciated.
Yeah.
We have such a great listener base.
Yeah, y'all are so sweet. Ooh, one quick housekeeping note. Couple people misgendered me. It's cool. I don't think I made it explicit in the early episodes because, full disclosure, I was still figuring it out. So just a reminder, I use they, them pronouns, and I'm not like a woman or a girl, etc. So like, just to keep that in mind. But yeah, I getcha.
And if we misgender you in any of these, let us know. Sorry, we didn't mean to.
For sure. Sometimes we're just guessing, just based on the email.
Yeah.
So, okay.
You guys are awesome. Continue to send these in. Any little thoughts crawling through your mind. We still have like a bunch on here that we'll kind of, use throughout our time recording.
Yeah, we didn't get to everybody.
Yeah. So if you're like, oh man, mine was left out. It might happen next time. It's an imperfect approach, ours.
Yeah, we just go through. Honestly, it's just like whichever one tickles my fancy. And I'm like, I can definitely answer this. And I try to get a mix of things that like Grady's going to research and then I'm going to try to tackle a few. So yeah, it's a mix. All right. What are we doing next week?
Next week, we'll visit the Iberian Peninsula.
Ooh, am I going to get some of that fancy ham?
You probably will not, honestly, given the conditions.
Oh, no.
We'll be talking about the Spanish Civil War.
Hey, that guy pops up everywhere.
Yeah, this is a recurring guest here on the podcast. So many times for newer listeners, so many times we'll talk about somebody that we're, discussing in history, and they will have some sort of little instance in their life connected to the Spanish Civil War.
All right, starting off the summer of communism.
Yep.
In the meantime, you can catch us online. We are on Twitter at teachmecommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can send us an email, teachmecommunism@gmail.com. That's where you want to go if you want to send us questions or suggestions for future episode. We keep a running doc of all of our listener suggestions so we can try to prioritize those as we can. You can and should leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. One reviewer said that I laugh too much, but whatever. I'm very funny and cool. Not my fault.
It's just because, I say so many funny jokes that you just have to.
No, actually, they were saying that I make too many jokes.
And you laugh at them yourself? Oh.
Well, no, maybe that was the criticism. It's just that I make too many jokes. I don't maybe the laughing
You're
wasn't
too
part of
funny.
it. I'm too fucking funny and cool for this person. It's fine.
Maybe that means I have an annoying laugh, and that's what annoys them. Who knows?
I don't know. Anyway, everyone else was really nice. I'm just being a fucking loser. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm like, now I can't take that criticism, I guess.
Exactly. What sign was that?
That was his moon. My moon's in Aquarius. In theory, I shouldn't give a shit, but I really do. It's okay. It's okay. Everyone else was very sweet, so I appreciated it.
Awesome.
So yeah, go do that. Leave a review and a rating. It really helps people find the show, and you don't have to be an Apple user specifically to do that. You can just do it anonymously.
Awesome. Please do.
Yeah, please do that. And we are also on YouTube, if that's how you prefer to listen to podcasts. And finally, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/teachmecommunism. There, for $5 a month, you get access to our notes, both from this episode and from all of our backlog. Handy dandy resource there, full of links and cool shit and marked up PDFs. This time you'll get both of our notes, and I will also include my terrible star chart readings. So, yeah. Cool.
All right. Awesome. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Thank you again for all the questions. And thank you, Christine, for your partnership here, tackling these questions, and for your jokes, mainly.
Thanks.
And for your astrology expertise.
Thank you. I do what I can.
All right, listeners, you can catch us next week on another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.